And that's why you should drink 3 cups of coffee while you're sitting in a lobby at a nursery home at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Well, I don't know about the whole nursing home thing, but I've got the coffee part covered. I'm never very far from this cup. You can ask Linda. Oh crap, we're live.
Oh, what? Oh, I didn't. Did you press the button?
I thought you did.
So what's going on, Mark?
Well, what's going on here is excitement all over the place. I got a project done today that I'm very happy about. If you follow me on Facebook, you already know about it, so I'm not going to toot my horn here. If you don't follow me on Facebook, number one, shame on you. Number two, do so. Um, but I have today a update on a topic we talked about a few months back. Do you remember we were talking about the whiskey war?
Jeez.
Canada and Denmark.
What?
Canada and Denmark. Okay,
Wait,
it's
before you go, I
Mhm.
usually, just before you continue, I just want to say you're usually the one that's like, what did you? And then I have to remind you in this
Mhm.
scenario,
Mhm.
you've totally screwed my whole timeline up because I can't find it in the hallways of my mind. Maybe it's
Go
in
to
the.
the back section of the Rolodex and start flipping forward because it's been a while.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it's probably in that nursing home section of my
It
brain.
may be, which
All
is
right,
why you need 4 cups of coffee in the waiting room, not three.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Um, the Whiskey War was a unofficial battle between Denmark and Canada
Okay.
over a teeny tiny island. Now, for those of you who didn't hear this episode, there is an itty bitty island in the strait between Greenland and Canada. And I am not even going to try to pronounce these names here, but it's Ellesmere Island in Canada and Iceland, or excuse me, Greenland. Now, under international law, every country has sovereignty over their coastline and 12 miles out. Well, it just so happens that this island, the center of this island, is exactly 12 miles from each coast of Canada and Greenland, Greenland being a possession of Denmark. And they've been having a very low key, very civil whiskey war since the 1930s. And you'll probably remember this part of it. It started when a Canadian team went to the island, put up the Canadian flag, and left a bottle of Canadian whiskey
I remember now.
with a note that said, "Welcome to Canada."
Yeah, I remember now. And it went back and yeah.
And the following year, the Danish went there, took down the Canadian flag, put up the Danish flag, and left a bottle of Danish schnapps.
The Canadians.
Canadians, yes, and said, welcome to Greenland." And that went back and forth.
You just named that country, by the way. The population of the country. In the
Well,
future, you could call them Canadians.
have you seen this island?
I have not.
I'll show you in just a second. I will share my screen and show you.
Okay.
Um, on June 11th of this year, they finally have reached a peace treaty. So the people of Canada and the people of Denmark and the people of Greenland can now rest comfortably in their beds tonight, knowing that the whiskey war is over. And basically, let me go ahead and share here so that the folks can see what I'm talking about. This is Hans Island.
Okay. There's nothing on it.
Not a lot there, but you see this natural fault right here.
Yeah.
They have put the border right there. This is the Denmark side. This belongs to Greenland, and this belongs to Canada. They're approximately equal in territory. But now the whiskey war is over, and there's no longer any fighting.
Excellent.
Now, what they have done in the process, though, is Canada used to be the biggest country in the world that only had a border with one neighboring country, and that was us down here in the US. They are no longer on that list because now they have a land border with
Okay.
another country. They are also the second North American country in history to have a border with a European country, a land border with a European country.
That's interesting. It's true.
So it now the biggest country in the world with a land border
It's not
is
the biggest country in the world. Canada?
it was the biggest country in the world with one
Oh,
neighbor.
oh. Sorry, sorry.
Now the biggest one is Papua New Guinea,
Oh,
who has a border with one
Venezuela?
border with oh my gosh, Indonesia.
Oh, okay. Isn't there like a something Guinea in in South America or something?
There's
Or
Guyana,
Guyana.
yeah, but
Okay,
Papua New Guinea, the island, is a separate country from Indonesia, but on
okay.
one big island there is a land border, and that's the biggest country now with only one neighbor
Wow.
with a land border.
So we
So
lost something in this here.
yes, so it's
We
just
should
a
go to
weird
war.
thing.
We should go to war just for that. They took something from us. We have to rewrite things now in America due to Canadian due to Canadian um treaties with another country. Now they put us out of sorts. There's all these books.
Not really.
I'm trying to make a thing out of it.
Oh, okay. Well, wait till Grace here,
It's
then we
really, I'm
can.
trying to make it exciting or something. I'm trying to add issue where there's no issue.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that the theme nowadays anyhow? People looking to add issues where there's no issues.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, basically. So yeah, so now half of Hans Island belongs to Greenland, and the other half belongs to Canada, and everybody's happy. But my point in bringing that up before was I just thought it was a very civil way to have a war and a border dispute, and that's how it should be solved, with a bottle of whiskey and a note, you know,
Well,
saying "Welcome to wherever."
well, you're not gonna find that in places like Ukraine.
No, you're not. But you know, I figured, given all of that news coming out of there, a little bit of good news on a
Levity.
war that's now over officially
Yeah.
would be good welcome news. So
Well, I didn't expect to, but since it makes me think, and to be true to myself and the conversation at hand. See, I had other good
yeah,
feeling stuff, but I can't be not true to myself and say just my thoughts. Um, there's talk of potential escalation to the point of nuclear craziness. Now, that's insanity.
mhm.
If we go back into the 80s, thinking back in the 80s, and I guess before that, you could attest to, but in the 80s, we grew up, maybe not, you know, wigged out and stuff, because it wasn't like the 1960s into the 70s and stuff, but there was a lot of the propaganda on TV and films and such. And so we knew as Americans that if we get incoming, everybody pulls out their rifles, shotgun. This is like there was an unspoken thing here in Miami, everywhere. I'm
Mhm.
assuming, but here in Miami, where we knew, oh yeah,
Mhm.
if there's invasion, everybody rocks,
Mhm.
bottles, guns, whatever it needs to be done. There was a sense of that. I don't know, maybe it was in my own head, but um, I interacted with a lot of people, and there
Mhm.
was a feeling. There was a feeling. There was a sense.
Well, it
Although
was
plans weren't put on the table per se amongst the populace.
Yeah, amongst the populace. Well, that's because we all grew up with that Cold War mentality. And, I mentioned it before when we were talking about science fiction movies. Every invasion from Mars movie made after World War II was a metaphor for a Soviet invasion. And I mean, that went all the way up to the end of the Cold War when, Soviet invasion was always, or mutually assured destruction. The atomic war, the nuclear war thing. Uh, Rick French is quoting from Matthew Broderick movie War Games. The best way to win is not to play the game. And I don't know about you, Rick, but I have a feeling that that movie's going to get quoted a lot here in the coming months, and I would venture to say it gets a whole new popularity, for better or worse. I mean, I thought it was a decent movie, but when I saw it, I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
So
I don't think I remember the movie. I don't think it was one of the with Matthew Broderick, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I remember the movie, but there were some movies like Flight of the Navigator
Mhm.
that for some reason I looked at the cover, and back then a lot of times, because you had your $3 or your $2 for the
Mhm.
rental, and or you'd go to the movie, but like just say you look at the cover and you make
Mhm.
your decisions based off the cover. And if I
Yeah.
think back, I didn't find it too cool, the cover of the
Mhm.
so I skipped out on it. And it's funny, but like if you
Yeah.
saw a Gremlin cover, you're
Yeah.
like, as a
Oh,
kid,
I got to see that. Yeah.
right? Um, uh, so let me just say this, throw this. This is going to be very left field because not everybody is up to speed with this, but I'm going to throw it out there. And if curiosity, you can always look for the plentiful literature online. But this whole like Russian,
Mhm.
those people, Ukrainians, and just all that, that Russian area. That's some very old, going back um, conflicts and stuff, and those people are so from there, anciently
Mhm.
from there,
Mhm.
um, that, well, what I wanted to say is this, that strangely enough, this war type mentality um, didn't just pop out of nowhere. Uh, I'm um, hypothesizing and musing, um, but with the concept that I'm laying out, but originally, people from that area headed towards the east. And
Mhm.
so basically, what I'm trying to get at is this: those people that are battling over there, and that sort of battling, and that
Mhm.
that's the whole thing, and the fighting and all that. Um, those people, all of us, any anyone in the population of Western Europe, comes there, at least on the paternal side, from those people.
Mhm.
Not those people today, but the
Right.
ancestors of all of them and us came from that zone that populated the West. You could look at I mean, the literature's out there. Paternally, we are all connected to those people. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that the warlike thing is spread throughout the population. Um, and we always want our side to win.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm any different. I wouldn't think,
Yeah.
regardless of who the external, even if they're right,
Mhm.
I want us to win. Even if
Mhm.
they're right, the opposing team,
Yeah.
even if the opposing team is right, I'm going to go
But
ahead and
well, but
protect my corral, my little flock.
But think about that for just a second, because you said something pretty profound there with I don't think with realizing. You said, even if they're right,
Yeah,
because what that indicates is you have to be willing to face the fact
that you're wrong.
and possibly accept the fact that you might be the bad guy,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And in that kind of a situation, is anybody willing, because both sides believe they're right, but to say, well, even if they're right, I want my side to win, that means you have to face the fact, and you have to accept the fact, and you already have accepted the fact that you
Mhm.
just might be the bad guy in this scenario.
Yeah. Well, in order to, so, but I'm saying, well, that is a good point, but let me just add this to it then, because it is true. I did say that, and I stick with it. But let me add this caveat, um, and still, I still would say the same thing if it were different. But let me add this caveat. I'm thinking from the perspective of us here
Mhm.
and having incoming towards us.
Right.
There's a legitimacy in that. But I did say, even if we're wrong, there's no scenario in my mind where there's incoming that we would be wrong. But if we're somewhere else,
Mhm.
encroaching, let's say, from the point of view of another group of people, ethically, broadly speaking, um, who's ever who's whose land it is, they have the
Well,
predominant right by far,
well,
and
sure.
the incoming group that's trying
Mhm.
to acquire, for whatever, we're just speaking broadly, they would not have the moral high ground in a broad sense without knowing details. Now that's
Right.
different if said place has a imminent potential for the destruction of a, there's complications with all that. But
Yes,
I guess the
there is.
sentiment behind the thing, so if we have to think on it, it gets complicated. But I'll just sum it up with this: at the end of the day, we, generally speaking, are going to protect our flock
Sure.
regardless of the scenario. um, but we're not immune to having a mirror placed in front of us and seeing that we've, maybe we don't have the moral high ground in a certain situation,
Right.
this and that. So because we're
Sure.
human at the end of the day, but there
Well,
is a tendency for us to basically gun ho our own, let's say, you know.
mhm. Well, it's also, your sword is different from your shield. You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
defense is one thing, attack is quite another.
Yeah. Right.
And it's
Yeah.
rare, it's rare that you will have the more moral high ground if you go on the attack.
Yeah.
It's rare. It happens.
So from my point of view,
Mhm.
my limited understanding of the goings on, from the vantage point of a person seeing it through
Mhm.
the interwebs, and whatever one might explore, and whatever one's fairness point is, like all these
Mhm.
variations, because you can look at something and say, oh, I've decided, and this is this and that's that. But
Mhm.
if you're more conscientious about it, and more nuanced, you could go down a rabbit hole that could actually point the finger back at you. So there's scenarios.
Sure.
But as
Sure.
far as what I know from seeing it, with the lack of information that could add to my perspective,
Mhm.
just right now, just the idea that you have these people that are um, Ukrainian people in their homeland
Mhm.
currently, with schools and
Yeah. Just trying to live
hospitals,
their lives.
and then you have this force coming in. It already, in my opinion, puts me on the side of saying no. The Ukrainians have complete right to push these people back out.
Sure.
Although I have no ill will towards anybody, Russians
Yeah.
or Ukraine. I really don't have any.
I don't either.
I don't have ill will toward. But that's easy for me to say from the safety of my
Yeah.
abode, in the country that
10,000 miles away. Yeah.
right. So now, if I were,
Mhm.
so if I were a Russian, even Russian people, if you see the interviews that they have
Mhm.
out there, they're like, no, we don't want to deal with this crap. This is
Yeah.
lunacy. Like you, but that could be limited propaganda for me here in America, and I
Yeah.
don't know the complete sentiment. So we're really blind on the thing. All I know is
Well,
that protecting your land is a big
mhm.
plus on the side of those
Yeah.
are the people that are right.
the guy that was out there planting corn and trying to harvest grain and doing all that other kind of stuff, he doesn't give a ding dong about world geopolitics. He doesn't. He's not thinking on that level. He's thinking about getting his crop taken care of. You know.
Right. Yeah.
And Rick here makes a fairly decent point, and I agree with you to a certain extent. He says bad guy and good guy are labels attached by historians well after a winner has been determined. I think in the big picture, I think he's right in that statement. But again, to the farmer out there who's just trying to harvest his crop, anybody who, it doesn't matter what side they're on, anybody driving through it with a tank is the bad guy. You know, to the average guy on the street who's watching people die or hearing about bombings here or bombings there or rocket attacks or anything, whoever's doing the shooting is the bad guy.
From a textbook
So,
point of view, just for what Rick is saying, from a text
mhm,
point, so if you're like, let's say you're 100 years away from an event,
mhm. Yeah.
um, it is quite reasonable, and we see it there. We could point to different, we could, if we look, we can point to different scenarios. But you're sitting in a class and you're, reviewing 100 years a war that occurred and the players involved in the, I mean, that's if they do that. I'm sure they do in history class and stuff. I was sleeping during that time, so
Mhm,
I'm catching up now. But you could afford that sort of like, well, we did right by this situation and those people did wrong. But even then, if I remember back in school, they did plant you um, the certain pros and cons, so they didn't make it. If I remember well, I never got the sense. I don't know a specific scenario, so I'm thinking in
mhm,
a broad sense. I never felt the sense that that they were teaching in private school or public school, because I went to both,
mhm.
that they were teaching something to the effect of the enemy over there and the good guy. It was more like a bird's eye view of things that occurred
Mhm.
with some impositions
Right.
um, that I guess are significant as you get
Well,
older enough. If you pile on enough layers on a young mind, you can nudge them in a direction. I mean, that's part of the training or indoctrination of
well,
of people in a country, anyhow.
by that time, the Cold War was starting to kind of mellow out. You're talking about the mid 80s. You're looking at Brezhnev dying, then Chernyenko coming in. Then, man, they had like four leaders just bam, bam, bam. Um, three of them died of pneumonia, I believe. And I don't, it got to be to where I don't even remember all their names because one of them was there for like a month, and then he died because they keep electing these old guys. And when they got Gorbachev in, even though he was still pretty ding dong old, he was considered the young buck because it's like, well, he's not going to assume room temperature in the next 6 months. We'll be fairly stable now. And, he just died here not too long ago. I don't remember exactly when, but
A few months ago, I think.
yeah, it wasn't very long ago at all.
I
But
think it was either this year or the end of last year.
by that time it was starting to kind of mellow out. Um, and the threats of it was seen on both sides that mutually assured destruction was really a stupid policy. And there were nuclear arms talks and treaties and this, that, and the other. And even in the popular culture, it was starting to calm down quite a bit by the time you were in school and learning about things. But I still remember the nuclear drills, duck and cover, like us curling into a ball underneath our desk was going to save us from a 10 megaton missile or something. Um, and it was pretty much driven into us not to be paranoid, but don't trust them at all. don't trust because the Soviets are this and the Russians are that. And it was all used interchangeably. And it wasn't hyped as much as it was in my parents' generation, but it was still hyped pretty much. And it's interesting to me after the Soviet Union collapsed in, I believe it was 93. I think 93 when the Soviet Union finally fell apart, 92 maybe. Anyway, I don't remember. Um, and it was okay. The great Satan is gone. They're no longer a threat. We can just all kind of take a big breath and relax, and everything's cool. It's interesting to see the reaction to these people who came up after the Cold War ended and never heard of things like what we're hearing now. Because mutually assured destruction and hearing the threat of a nuclear war, I can't count that high to tell you the number of times I heard during political campaigns or speeches or even just in the popular culture, oh, this guy's he's gonna destroy the world because he's gonna have his finger on the nuclear button. I mean, that was just ingrained in us. We talked about that all the time, and we were just sure. We just knew that the world was going to end tomorrow. So live it up and have fun today. And then the Cold War, things kind of mellowed out, and then the Soviet Union collapsed, and the threat of that was more or less over. Now, all of a sudden, it went from 0 to 60, in however many seconds. And it's interesting to see people react to something that, I mean, I've lived my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
They hadn't heard of that threat. And now we all,
Mm-hmm.
are hearing about it. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to see their reaction.
Well, I would say that in my case,
Mm-hmm.
and for people of my generation in Miami, remember we're the children of refugees.
Mm-hmm.
I'm literally an American-born son of two exiled parents.
Mm-hmm.
So we got anybody that grew up in my time period, slightly before and slightly after that chunk of time, from the 70s, well, frankly, from the 60s up until the 80s, um, the Russians were just one half step away from the Cubans because Russia fed Cuba
Mm-hmm.
um, with weaponry, money, um, equipment. We're 90 miles away from Cuba from here. Actually, more from here where I'm at, literally, but
Mm-hmm.
from our southernmost point, it's 90 miles away to the island.
Yeah.
We're flooded with the exile community. And so it was always, and the people here know to what extent um, these people can go,
Right.
this ideology can go. So um, we, we we had that clear in our minds, um, due to the missile crisis and so on
Yeah.
and so forth. So it's different than an American living somewhere else of a later generation than yours, growing up somewhere in
Mm-hmm.
just a regular old community that they're quite removed from any
Yes.
sort of human craziness, generational craziness that my parents were part of. So I'm quite aware of, because it was at the dinner table, it was
Yeah.
drinking coffee afterwards, it was all the time. But strangely enough, in school, um, we were just living our normal lives. But at home,
Yeah.
so it's weird. So we didn't get that attention in school necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
but at home we did, even after the fact that these people are so crazy, they're capable of doing anything.
Yeah. Well, we got it at school up until I want to say about seventh or eighth grade. So I would have been what? 12, 13, 14, something like that. I don't remember how old I was in junior high school, but I know all throughout elementary school, it was still duck and cover. And Jim Dockrell says here, I thought it was funny that they told you to hide from a nuclear fireball by hiding under kindling your desk. You're not saying anything that we didn't say at the time. You know, we're like, well, why do we need to get under our desk? Well, in case something falls through the ceiling. I'm like, well, what about that 20,000-degree fireball coming through the wall? You know, this desk isn't gonna just get under your desk. Okay.
I don't know if Greg is out there, but the other day, because I was watching the news and it was pretty intense stuff, and I thought, because I always find these ironic things. It's probably not funny for anybody, but I was gonna write a little post and sort of tag Greg in it, but I didn't do it. But I said, I'm gonna become some crazy stuff that you think. I'm gonna become like mayor of Miami, and I'm gonna tell the civilians to get up on their roofs and spray paint arrows pointing in the direction of Manitoba, so that when the missiles come with little flags, they go that way. Because just crazy stuff that one thinks.
One of my favorite Larson cartoons, The Far Side. Remember The Far Side? It's looking through a rifle scope at a bear, and you see the crosshairs pointing at a bear, and he's standing next to another bear, and he's pointing to his buddy right next to him. No, go over there. Go over there. Yeah. No, aim over there. This is a better one. And the other dude's like, what? The other bear, rather. But yeah. It was a strange time, but I don't know. I don't know if it was complacency or you get to the point where you're just tired of hearing it. And the public consciousness was kind of like, yeah, we know they're bad. Yeah, we know they're the bad guys. Yeah, we know they're going to kill us. Yeah, we know they want to invade. Yeah, we know nuclear bombs. And it almost got to the point to where you were like, would somebody either push a button or just shut the hell up? We're sick and tired of hearing about it.
Well, I kind of mentioned something to the equivalent of that last week when I said, I'm paraphrasing myself. I can't. Where I said, dude, have you noticed, like on the news? Obviously, you've noticed on the news, year after year, month after month, as long as you can remember, things are always tragic. It's always getting worse. It's imminent. It's on the doorstep. It's ringing the bell. It's never. You might get one happy puppy with a bow every now and a blue moon to balance things out, as balanced as they can be. But for the most part, everything is full throttle, end of the world, galaxies colliding. And it's like, it's a perpetual keeping people in. Now, it's different keeping people in fear in the mind than it is to actually physically see people drop.
But it's easier now. It's changed. That's the whole problem. It's changed from keeping people afraid because that big time threat isn't there. Now it's keeping people mad. They had to replace fear with anger because fear wasn't working anymore.
Yeah. Let me tail that with something I ran into. I hate to say it. Not really. I don't hate to say it. I want to say it, but I also don't want to be like, understand, I'm not. So,
if you have to put out a disclaimer.
Well, no, because it's here's the thing. There's billions of people on Earth. Yeah. And we have a lot of people in each of our countries and whatnot. And everybody's got a different take, slightly removed by 1 degree or less, or maybe a lot from an idea. If you compound ideas into a bigger bowl, then you might as well be talking to somebody from the planet Neptune, an alien from the planet Neptune, because you're not going to come to any type of consensus. It's always a push and tug and sort of like a blender, and you keep adding ingredients and it's always churning. So since I see that, you're basically screwed with whatever. You can pick the most benign thing, but anyways, I'll say it anyhow. Whatever. So, um, yesterday was Columbus Day,
Mhm.
and people were also saying it was Indigenous Peoples Day. I could give a crap what the heck people, this and that. But I saw a post where they put, Happy Columbus Day, and it proceeded with a battle of epic proportion and epic
Yeah.
stupidity in the way people were explaining their positions. That's easy for me to say because I would say that since my opinion, since I'm me,
Yeah.
in my mind, I'm looking and I'm reasoning it out in my mind with what I know. And I'm thinking, that's stupid. That's not stupid. That's really stupid. That's sort of right, but you're wrong. I like your position, but you screwed that up. So
Mhm.
you're leaving yourself open to more attacks. And I was looking at this war rampage here were the sides, between the people that were anti Christopher Columbus due to his atrocities and barbaric actions that consequently occurred, um, and then the people that don't support him, and then the people that do support him because they say history, this changed, history, and they brought civilization and all these things. And whether they're right or wrong, they were both on that. And what I noticed was that everybody there had a point. It is true
Mhm.
that people were affected adversely,
Mhm.
and it is true that people were benefited from it.
Mhm.
Sometimes the people you assume were affected adversely actually were the people that benefited from it, and vice versa. Some people that you would have assumed that would have benefited from it actually ended up dead on some beach with a lance stuck in their gut because
Mhm.
as they disembarked, some tragedy happened, or some people start. There's just it's and so I'm reading this whole thing now. Full disclosure, my general preference is towards the European discovery. Generally speak, we wouldn't be here without that.
Mhm.
And frankly, we're the ancestors, the descendants of those people. But at the same time, in a roundabout way, we're the descendants of all those people, and we're the inheritors
Mhm.
of all that came before us. So
Mhm.
the one piece that I saw these people, because there were people defending it on the grounds of Italian because of
Mhm.
Christopher. There were people attached to that because it was under the Spanish flag.
Mhm.
So the Spanish were defending the situation, and
Mhm.
then you had these other people from different walks of life that were on the inverse of that and going at it and going at it and going at it, and it was back and forth. And so another thing they missed is that they're bringing in, and we've talked about this, they're attributing all of history to the person they're attacking,
Yeah.
as if
To
that
to
person,
one person. To one person.
right? So there was a lady, she was a Spanish lady.
Mhm.
She was a Cuban lady with Spanish ancestors, like me.
Mhm.
Well, I'm American. You get the point. It's
Yeah.
my trajectory. And she was in the affirmative, saying, "Hey, listen, you know, this happened, but guess what? She did go overboard because she said we had to. She poured it on thick. We civilization and this and that and the wheel and this. She was pouring it on like heavy freaking duty. I wouldn't have gone in that direction but since she was being attacked,
Mhm.
she was on guard, so she was hitting them with fire
Mhm.
because they weren't playing nice. Nobody was playing nice. But I would have reserved in certain little angles because you don't want to approve of unjust actions, but neither do you want to um, um, concede both in order to appease people. You don't want none of that. You want to be fair and you want to accept what's wrong but at the end of the day, that lady was born probably 30, 40 years ago at best. Um, and she's not attached other than the long thing of history, she's responsible for her actions, and the one guy. So they see everything in groups, and you can do that. But if you do that, that in anybody that says, "Oh, all those people of that group," I'm not even going to use a term, but all those people of that group, then what you end up doing is that you're justifying then any attributes you want to give to those people. And what it is basically, um, in my opinion, an error, because you're basically doing what the Nazis did.
Well,
You're saying this group of people, you know,
yeah.
they're not individuals, they're freaking a group of people, and they're bad, and that's bad, and we're gonna go ahead and so yeah, so I
And we have a word for that. It's called bigotry.
yeah.
When you start assigning traits to a group, it's bigotry, plain and simple. But that's a good illustration of what I mean when I say they had to replace fear with anger because fear wasn't working anymore. Well, it turns out anger works very, very well. So that's the whole thing. Divide, 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 so we can stay in power and keep going to the bank. Because if you and I are busy arguing amongst ourselves, we're not paying attention to anybody else. And that's what these people are after.
Yeah, so the whole obviously everything is
Mm-hmm.
categorized, so you have your, well, sometimes you're forced to, right? Like in a case of the Ukrainians, they're all Ukrainians now. I'm sure they have their infighting in their society to
Sure.
whatever extent. Maybe some people are of a particular
Well,
category group that they may associate with, and then the others have some sort of other very. I don't know what that might be. I'm assuming a lot now, but let's say, um, but when they're all attacked,
yeah.
they're all
Do you?
they're all saying, "Hey, we're all Ukrainian, and now we're going to deal with stuff." So
Well, do you remember what it was like on September 13th,
mhm.
2001? September 12th, we were still kind of reeling and nothing was real.
No, we were just looking at the screen like, "What?"
What? Yeah, it was disbelief, stunned disbelief on September 12th. September 13th was completely an entirely different country. I had never seen anything like that before in my life. Never. And there were no groups. There was no division that I saw.
No,
It
everybody
was
coalesced.
like exactly. And it's it's hateful that it has to be something like that that does it because
And,
all the BS went away.
and
All
mind
the
you that, and mind you that was, and mind you, in any other scenario, that's New York City, that's New England area. These freaking people with their
yeah,
habits, those people, and those people over there in New England. But at the end of the day, from freaking the East Coast to the West Coast, from the Midwest all the way down to the South, everybody was like, "I don't think so." They were pissed.
yeah.
So that's a good example. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think about New York unless it's in the news for some reason. Because you're absolutely right. Oh, those people get mugged all the time, and they just shoot one another to pass the time because they're
Yeah.
all so jam packed. And but then boom, how the hell dare you?
Well,
You know,
but to be fair, when the London bombings occurred,
I was on their side as well. I
I
mean,
was also, well, okay, yeah. So that's what I was gonna say. When the London bombings occurred, and then there was bombings in Madrid. There were various.
mhm,
There was a. I was still, like, whoa, 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 whoa. So there was a, a bigger envelope,
mhm,
or a bigger reach,
yeah,
encompassing a bigger category that we all fall under, which I would call, generally speaking, Western civilization, although it's such a broad, loose term.
yeah.
But we all feel it. Even Paris, when Paris was
Yeah,
hit.
but I don't even know if I would attribute that to Western civilization, because I think that the feeling would have been the same if it had happened again in Tokyo or in Hong Kong.
That is true. You are right. But my point
So
is not. But wait a second.
I,
But my
I
point.
think what it is it was a definite line of this is innocence and this is evil.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know what? I think you're right. But I was trying to extend, and maybe, but I think you're right. I was trying to extend from. Well, then again, now that you say that, um, was it
Well,
that New York? No, no. Is it that New York is part of our thing, and now we're pissed, or was it that that's just evil? No, I think that no, that's part of us, right?
I think it was both. I really do.
Oh,
It
oh yeah,
was
it was both. It
New
was
New New York was like the little brother that you love to pick on. And New York is this, and New York is that. But you know what? I can slap my little brother around all I want, but you better keep your fingers off of him because I'm going to protect him. That's
correct.
my brother, and you don't mess with my brother.
And
But
so, what you're saying that once it leaves the United States and goes to Europe, you're more thinking in terms of that's just evil, but you're not feeling a certain. Because I do, I feel a certain
there is
woe.
still a certain camaraderie there. There is still a certain. I mean, we have allies. I mean, let's think about it. If somebody was to attack the UK, I would take that just as personally as if they hit Medford right down the
What if,
road from me.
what if tomorrow they hit all the 7-Eleven Slurpee shops in and around Manitoba? Would we get the same outrage? That's an inside. I'm sorry. I go
No,
ahead.
what we would do is you and me would beat feet to North Dakota and open up a 7-Eleven right on the other side of the border and watch it come rolling in.
Ladies and gentlemen, last night,
The
fourteen
Slurpee
thousand.
Underground.
Ladies and gentlemen, last night, 14,000 Slurpee shops across the greater Manitoba area have been hit
Okay.
with some sort of device. There will be no there will be no Slurpees for the foreseeable. That's an insight. I
Oh, it
think
would
we
be
talked about it.
chaos.
Yeah, because what it is supposedly the world capital of Slurpee for those that don't know of Slurpee consumption is actually Manitoba.
Well, it's
And
just specifically, it's oh my God, I can't think of the name of the town. It's right there. Greg is right outside of it. I can think of the name of Greg's town, but I can't think of that. Winnipeg. I couldn't think of Winnipeg. God, that's getting more and more embarrassing every day.
yeah.
Oh man. But
um
yeah, but then again, if let's just say North Korea launched a missile and it hit Tokyo, do you think
same.
you think we would stand back and say, "Man, sucks to be y'all"?
No, you're right. You're
No,
right.
it's
There's an evil attribute to not attribute. It's an obvious evil move to
hmm
attack. Uh, to be attacked
hmm
is, I think, universally recognized as a crappy move
hmm
at its most benign and completely evil. And the justification needed to do something like that, like I think I don't know enough about the inside baseball, but I know that to some degree Russia is claiming some sort of oppression and Nazi activity from
yeah,
they're giving them attributes,
they're
and
projecting.
well, you know, I don't know. All I know is that at the level of being attacked, I don't like
Mhm.
it, but I'm not
Sure.
informed enough to say detail. I just it looks really bad to
Yeah.
bomb cities.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't look good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and this is an unpopular opinion, and I've thought about bringing this topic up, but I've kind of withheld because I know how you and I get. But I wanted to bring up the topics of unpopular opinions
Oh
because
crap.
I have several of them. But this is one of them, and please don't misunderstand. But things like what we're seeing over there, that's what happens in a war. That's what happens. People die. Innocent people die. Cities get bombed. innocent women and children, non-combatants get killed. That happens in a war. That's why it should be unthinkable. War is supposed to be horrific. War is supposed to be terrible. War is supposed to be unjust, unjustifiable, and the worst thing that could ever happen on the face of the planet. It should also be the last thing anyone should ever consider doing. And I know that's easy for me to say, sitting here in a climate controlled home under no threat of attack from anything but the mosquitoes that are beating on the door right now.
For
That's
now.
easy for me to say. But that's why it should never be even on the table, because people die and horrible things happen.
I mean, it wasn't easy taking off from what you're saying. It must have not been very easy at all. There's many examples. Okay, I'm just picking one. For colonial America to up and escalate it to the point they did at that time, considering all the variables and lack of, I mean, sure, it would have been in a situation like today, something like that. Well, anyways, I'll just say this. It must have been incredibly difficult for the colonies to up and do that,
Mm-hmm. It
even
was.
though, right. So it must have been insanity, because what it was, well, you could pick any
It was
revolution.
treason. I mean, you know, if you want to get specific about the American Revolution, all you have to do is read their writings at the time. They knew when they signed the Declaration of Independence, they were signing their own death warrants. They knew. And they knew that nothing was ever going to be the same, win or lose. They knew that they were basically traitors to the crown, and that what they were doing was signing a document that in which they admitted to treason against the crown.
And the weird thing is, or not weird, well, you could use whatever, at the time, it was inconceivable
Mm-hmm.
in the brain. I mean, yes and no. You're talking hundreds and hundreds of years or thousands of years of existence under royal, rule, throughout Europe, let's say, and you may have had an idea of what a republic was during the time of Rome and from the Greeks. And these people were well read people, and there were people writing at the time, with ideas, but to put that in practice and the cost that it cost, was completely inconceivable, brand new, um, to self govern.
Mm-hmm.
The nuts that you
Yeah.
had to have, in the trazas, had to be, you know,
But even then, they didn't know that it was going to work. And the first attempt didn't work. I mean, you know, the Confederation of States didn't work. It lasted about, what, 9 years, I think, something like that. And it just basically was an ineffectual method of governing. So much so that when they finally got everybody together, said that we're going to have a delegation meeting in Philadelphia, they got everybody there under false pretenses, locked the doors, and said nobody leaves until we come up with a constitution and hash this stuff out. Because they knew that if they put out that word from the get-go, half of them wasn't going to show up. So they basically lied to get these people in, to Independence Hall in Philadelphia and hash out the Constitution.
insane.
And yeah, because the Confederation of States didn't work. The central government had no powers at all, but had all the obligations.
Now, we grab that scenario. that event in history,
Mm-hmm.
and we place it to the side, and we
Mm-hmm.
move into 2022. In comparison, war in general, but we're talking about the
Mm-hmm.
Russian thing. Um, the weaponry they had
Mm-hmm.
compared to the destructive power that that countries are capable of now,
Mm-hmm.
the risk factor, even though that was just insanity.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about the revolution, but moving it into our world
Mm-hmm.
with the capacity of complete total destruction,
Mm-hmm.
it's too much. It's too much,
It is.
because you could say, let's say, complete wipeout.
Mm-hmm.
um People are going to survive,
Yeah.
but it's going to throw humanity into the stone age. I mean, I don't know, is it going to be some sort
Um,
of what would you call it, what was that movie with in Australia,
Mad Max, the
Mad
dystopian. Yeah.
Would it be a dystopian thing? I mean, who knows? But
Yeah.
but the
But
point is destruction.
I don't think it'll get to that point because, and this speaks to Jim's point, Jim Dockrell over here. He says it would make more sense in a war, which makes no sense, to shoot at targets that are likely to shoot back. Civilian targets don't do that. The ultimate goal of all war is to break the enemy's will to continue to fight. And if that means the destruction of civilian targets, then that's what it means. Again, an unpopular opinion, but it happens to be backed up by history. Um, it's very rare that one army wipes out the other army. They break the enemy's will to continue to fight. Then they sue for peace. Then a treaty is figured out and a surrender is given, or a peace accord is signed, or something like that, one or the other. But one side has to break the other side's will to continue to fight. That's what ends wars.
And by the way,
And we have a modern example to show that, and that is Korea. Neither side broke the other's will to fight. So the Korean War is not over. They're under a ceasefire. So basically, it's just on pause forever. But either
um,
side could start shooting again at any time.
so I was gonna add to that equation, or not the equation, just add to the insanity of it. It's not like the Russians have not suffered casualties. They have
Yeah.
suffered. Um, I've heard numbers. I'm not going to repeat them because um,
I
I
don't
don't know
think
if they're
anybody knows accurate numbers. I really don't think anybody knows because both sides are going to lie.
both sides are going to lie, but there's averages out there, and there's that. We're not talking. It's just an average, not an accuracy thing. But any decision like what they've done, even if you have the superior power supposedly,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have loss of life on your side.
Right.
So you're making a decision that you're aware of that will cost the lives of these men that are sons and daughters, children, fathers that have families. You're basically, by your action. Now, I'm not suggesting, like, I don't know the whole geopolitical scenario
Mm-hmm.
of what's to gain and what. I mean, I know a general sense, but like all the details, I don't know. I'm just thinking
Yeah.
in terms of the consequences, generational problems for so many people. You
Yeah.
don't just come back from war if you do make it out. You don't just lose your loved one, and then it's all back to normal. You have
Right.
created a generational
Mm-hmm.
problem
Mm-hmm.
just by deciding to do what you've decided to do
Yeah.
for
And
your
that
own people.
and that's the point right there. You have created a generational problem. You have created the generational problem. You know, we can step back here and say Ukraine was no threat to Russia.
We don't know.
But again, I don't follow, the diplomacy between the Ukraine and Russia. I don't follow most of the diplomacy between the US and Canada. And they're our friends, you know, regardless of the BS that we give Jim Dockwell or Greg or John
Oh no,
Cousins or
that's
anybody else. But that's
yeah, that's
friends picking on one another.
yeah.
But you could bet your sweet tail that if it came down to it and they came from over the other side of the North Pole and started heading for Greg's hooch, I'd be there with him, helping him out. You
And
know,
I'd be defending the Slurpee
you,
shop
yeah,
because I know that's a prime target
the Battle of Winnipeg. Yeah.
with Slurpee decals. They'd sell shirts. You'd have little flags with Slurpee stuff on the side.
Yeah, that's it.
No, but yeah, of course, right? Of course.
So, I mean, it's I don't know. I can't tell you who the good guy and the bad guy is in the Ukraine Russia thing. I really don't. Part of me says to root for the underdog. And the other part of me says just sit back and watch, because it may affect me years down the road, but probably not. I don't know. So let's observe, let's take in the information, and then we'll process it as it comes in, Mark. I mean, because that's about all I can do.
Well, from our point of view, but obviously from our point of
Right.
view, because I mean, what is it? It's we're where we're at, but
Yeah.
if we were in some sort of farming community in near Kiev, and they're scorching the land, and
Mhm.
and your cousins are being attacked,
Right, right,
and stuff.
right,
Now the immediacy,
right,
and it's very clear and very obvious,
right.
regardless of so it's like
Yeah.
it's a very
The,
dirty
the
thing.
the guy out there in the field again trying to just get his crop in, just trying to harvest his crop. He's innocent. He doesn't know or care anything about the politics between Kiev and Moscow. He doesn't probably even pay attention to it. All he knows is I've got two field hands that don't want to show up because they're hungover, and I got to get this crop in the silos. That's all he knows, and that's all he cares about. He's just trying to live a life.
Yeah.
And that, to him, anybody, doesn't matter what flag it's waving, anybody that crosses that field is the bad guy. So,
Let me tie this in with the beginning thing that I had meant. So this is a scenario that's happening now. We're not directly affected. Maybe in some ways we are, through some economic and other things, maybe, and we don't know. We don't have a clear picture, but we know that we're here at home, in the United States. But isn't that true throughout history? How many conflicts have there been amongst populations, nation states, and scenarios have turned one way or the other? Just last week we were talking about the with JP, or the week before, where the Spanish went with the Armada, and then I said, well, wait, there was another story. Well, we haven't heard it. Well, this is what happened. But then Napoleon went and attacked Spain, and then England came in, and then it's one thing after the other throughout the long lens of history, and we're all. So with the Christopher Columbus thing and that post that I saw, they're looking at it, and there's no wiggle room. They just see, man did bad thing, no good. We don't like bad thing.
Yeah.
We fight bad thing.
Right.
This is what they're basically saying, and they may say it eloquently in their minds, but what they're saying is, me no like bad thing, he bad man.
Yeah.
So they're basically saying that, but dressing it up in 2022 parlance. And so, but history is so darn messy. We've come down the pike due to uncountable variations of political and military action and migrations and all sorts of things. So it's to judge. You can judge. You can say, "Oh, that was bad. I don't like that." But you're but that's really all that you can't go and stuff. How dare those 13th century monks have
Well,
done what they did?
yeah.
I'm so
And
pissed now. I'm going out to the corner. I'm going to stop my feet. It's just
yeah, that's what I keep asking you. Okay, let's just say that they are 100% correct. Now what? You want to dig him up and shoot him?
yeah.
The guy's been dead for 500 years. What do you want to do?
Well, because they see the world. There's a certain, I don't even know how to. They want to
They wanted to have
settle
never.
this. No, they want to in their minds settle a score that they feel, because what since they believe that everything is black and white.
Mhm.
Here's your chunk of justice, and here's your chunk of not justice.
Okay.
And these people fall into the category of vilified, and these people fall into the and as a rough draft bird's eye view, I would concede that you could sort of do that. But then
Mhm.
when the bird starts flying in, flapping its wings closer to the
Mhm.
battleground, um, you notice that it's actual individuals
Mhm.
going about their lives in the midst of chaos.
Yeah.
How can you make such ample judgments on the movement of people throughout time without having the foresight of what was to come? From your vantage point in 2022,
Well, yeah.
acting as if you're the monk on the mountain, and you have all this knowledge. They have no respect for history. They have no respect for the generations before them, and
Most
the
of them don't
struggles
even know the history.
and the struggles that and the struggles that their ancestors went through.
Mhm.
By the way, the conclusions that their ancestors came to, and the reason for the conclusions that their ancestors came to, and the fact that their ancestors, as right as they may have been in one thing or two or three or 10, they could have been wrong in one or two or three or 10 as well. But that's the lot that's the we're only given the die that we're given, and we toss the die, and those are the options we get. And
Mhm.
people today, with their righteousness, and they're allowed to have it, but for goodness sake, such rigidness in their way of looking at things, they will be as wrong for people 100 years from now
Yeah.
as they think that they're right for observing people 100
Mhm.
years ago.
Yeah.
Hindsight,
Yeah.
they have a right to say, well, that's bad and this is bad,
Well,
and there are
sure.
things that are bad.
But
but
they also have the right to shut up and turn off their computer.
but they don't do that because they have
Right.
a calling, and
Yeah.
their calling
Well,
is to judge everybody from different groups
mhm.
according to their
But
terms of justice.
don't you dare judge them.
Yeah.
But don't you dare judge them.
Well, no, they don't play fair. They play
See,
dirt.
of course, what they want is they want the absolute right to run their lives and live the life they want to, while reserving the right to demand to run yours as well.
Yeah,
And that's what I mean. They have replaced anger with, excuse me, they've replaced fear with anger. Happens to work. Very effective.
yeah, it's very easy to judge. So
Yeah,
let's
because
use let's.
we have the luxury of hindsight, you
It's
know.
like it's like if we're with our buddies. I'm going to use this. This might be dangerous, and I say, Canadians are always polite.
Hmm.
That's such a that's benign to me, but maybe
Hmm.
they're like, no, we're not always nice. What is this? They
Well,
may take issue with that, but well, no, let me just say this thing. But
mhm.
they may take issue. The they is actually in reality individuals living in a geographic area with their own ideas and personalities. It's not like they're all attached to the hip, just like Americans are not all attached to the hip. There
Yeah,
are some commonalities, generally speaking, but
right.
everybody's an individual actor, and that's
Hmm.
what and that's what these people from that post, you know, um, they don't want to. It's easier to attack a group, call them bad,
Uh-huh.
as opposed to acknowledge that, oh, wait a second, they're individuals and they may vary.
What they don't understand, though, is when they do that, they're showing their ignorance on both
They,
sides. On both sides.
yeah,
On both sides. And
yeah.
that's why I unplug and I choose not to. I see something like that, I'm like, goodbye, click, done,
Well,
it's over.
let me turn the page because I wanted to share one thing with you. I know we're
Okay,
coming up on the hour, but I want to share something a little bit lighthearted.
okay,
Um,
yeah, we
I
could
don't
use it.
I don't know if you. I had a few
Mhm.
lighthearted things, but anyways, and they were all good in my mind.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Have you ever heard of Hoover the seal?
Hoover the talking seal. Yes,
Darn it!
I have. I've
Awesome.
heard of Hoover the talking seal. On the Today Show, I want to think it was.
Do you know the story behind him?
And a little bit, not much, just kind of anecdotally.
Okay. Well, I ran into the Hoover thing and I thought it was great. So they're up in Maine.
Mhm. It
There
was in
there
Maine.
was
Okay.
this gentleman that ran, that was walking by the ocean, by the
Mhm.
uh, the beach, and he saw an abandoned seal, a baby seal. And he called his brother and they went looking for the mother so they can reunite the seal. This was back in the 70s, early 70s. So they could reunite with the mother, but one of the brothers found the seal, the mother seal, dead on the rocks.
Mhm.
Just very sad. And the one brother, after thinking about it, decided to take the baby seal home.
Mhm.
So they made a little pen for him. They started feeding him. They stayed with him, and then they made a bigger pen in a pond. And then its eating was so um exaster like there was a they needed to be fed a lot, so they asked for a company, and the company accepted they said we'll send you fish, and so they were trying to take care of it. Early on, when it
Mhm.
was a baby, it wouldn't drink milk, and one of the neighbors said, why don't you blend fish into some sort of slop and see if that works. And in fact, it did. And they would feed the seal the slop of fish, he'd suck it up like a Hoover. And
Mhm.
so they called him Hoover because of that. So he was like, but his eating got too much, too much. Well, anyways, um, during his stay with the family, because they had to make changes because you can't, a seal is going to get bigger and bigger. During the stay with the family, um, the guy had a very thick New England accent. It
Mhm.
was kind of like a rough and tough kind of
Yeah.
accent with a thick voice and scratchy. The seal started to imitate the man. He would vocalize
Mhm.
words,
Mhm.
and that was his connection with the man. Like, yeah, it
Mhm.
you bond with your. It's an incredible thing. Um, and so it got too big. The aquarium, this accepted, the donation. They would take the seal.
Mhm.
And when he went and took the seal because he was too big, um, he said, "Well, listen," and he talks.
Mhm.
His name is Hoover, and he talks. And they were like, they
Yeah,
didn't
right.
believe him, but he didn't press the issue. Um, the New England guy, he didn't press the issue because at the end of the day, it's solving a problem.
Mhm.
So the seal went into the aquarium, and it lived there. It never said anything. By the way, when it was at home, it would repeat in the same tone as
Mhm.
as his boss or a human father.
Mhm.
Like, hey, he'd say, "Yeah, come over here."
Yeah.
He'd say that. He said, "Come
Mhm.
over here." He sounded like somebody out in the woods, like some sort of. Um, it took 5 years, and they say until he got comfortable, the seal with his surroundings, and he started talking. People freaking wigged out. He would say, the people would come over and he'd say, "Hey, come over here." And people would be like, "What the hell?" It was hilarious, dude. When I saw that, I said, "Oh, I got to share that with Mark." But I'm glad that you had seen.
I remember it peripherally. I've heard about it on a show, and then I kind of looked into it, but this has been years back, a couple
Yeah.
years back. And I think they had footage of him on the Today Show or something like that. One of the early morning shows here in the States. And yeah, they talked about it on a British TV show that Linda and I watched. It. I haven't watched it in a while, but
Dude,
yeah, Hoover the Talking Seal.
dude, I
Yeah.
had never in my wildest imagination when I ran across that, I was like,
Mhm.
dude. And I listened, and I had to look for a clip of him. You can find clips of him talking,
Mhm.
and it sounds like a drunken guy coming in
Mhm.
after work, stumbling around. But he
Yep.
imitates it so well. It's not like he can have a conversation, but I guess it's like his point of contact with humans. It's like saying, "Hey, man," but it's so hilarious.
Jamie wants to know, did the seal put his flipper up on the couch and eat Cheetos all day? It might
Probably.
have. I mean, do they have Kipper flavored Cheetos?
It was hilarious. You can Google it. And I
Yep.
have one more. Let me share the one more so that way I
Okay.
don't have to remember it for next time.
Okay.
You might know this one too.
Okay. Well, I know a lot about a little and a little about a lot.
Okay. Well, I think you're going to know this. So, in North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
well, because I was going to do a whole Americana theme type thing,
Okay.
but it went the route it did. Um, in North Carolina, also in the 70s, actually. Actually, no, that's wrong. Was it in the 70s? Probably in
I
the
don't know.
60s. Yeah, it was in the 70s too. In North Carolina, um, people there decided to build a theme park around the Wizard of Oz. Have you ever
Oh,
heard of the Wizard of Oz theme park in North
no,
Carolina?
no, I have. I don't think so.
Thank goodness, because I was like,
Well, Linda watches these TV shows on like Discovery and the Travel Channel and all this other good stuff. And occasionally they have one show called um, uh, History of the Abandoned or something like that. And they've done a couple of things on abandoned theme parks, but I'm trying to think of if that one rings a bell, and I don't think it does.
so what they did was they built a theme park on
Hmm.
the mountains,
Yeah.
and they actually built a yellow brick road,
Okay.
and the yellow brick road winds through the mountains up in
Hmm.
North Carolina, and people would visit and stuff, and it was great. You'd walk through the different villages and whatnot, and they didn't have like little people, so
Hmm.
sometimes they dressed up like kids in the uniforms so that it'd be part of the attraction. And then they had these balloons at the end, and it was their ride, and it would take you back to the beginning of the park.
Hmm.
You get off and stuff. They'd have little shops and stuff. They'd have little acts and stuff.
I
But
get it. You got in the balloon and went home back to Kansas.
that
Gotcha.
went
Hmm.
back home. But
Okay.
now what they did was in your entry to get in, or to start the tour, they had this house, like
Hmm.
Dorothy's house,
Hmm.
where everything was manicured and pretty. I mean, it was the Dust Bowl if you think back to
Sure.
the movie, but whatever, it's all nice. You walk in and everything is nice, and then you go down into a cellar,
Hmm.
and then they have projections and whatnot and light fixtures, and they make it so the storm is outside,
Hmm.
and then they have the exit, and when you exit, it's another part of the house, and then they've made things all tumbled out of
Hmm.
sorts, and just all turned upside down, and you exit, and then you begin your tour of you're in Oz. So it's a nice
Hmm.
little thing. Anyways, they did that, and it became untenable. There was a fire, there was problems, um and so it closed down, and for many years it was just abandoned there and stuff.
Hmm.
And then back in the 2000s, at some point, they've started doing it again, and I think they call it something to the effect of springtime in Oz, or something, autumn in Oz, or something like that. And it's coming back, and people are starting to come back. And
Oh, so they're renovating it and building it back up now?
Yeah, it started in the 70s,
Hmm.
um, or 60s or 70s, and it
No, I
had
hadn't heard of that.
problems. Yeah, it's an incredible. I had never heard of it. I ran into it and I said, "Well, that's a good thing to share because it's such a thing. If you ever look at it, and
Hmm.
there's footage of it they took back in the early days. It it's just an incredible. There's a documentary out there on it.
I'm going to
It's
have
an
to check
incredible.
into it because I'm interested in stuff like that. And Linda just corrected me. Mysteries of the Abandoned, it's called. And they talk about all kinds of wild things, old missile silos and, amusement parks, theme parks, things like that. And I don't remember what channel it's on, but, it'll be on when we're eating dinner or when we're going from one room to the other. I'm standing there talking to her. Um, so it's, I am interested in things like that. I got onto this renovation kick, and I think that's see. I don't know it. Every generation and every decade has had kind of a nickname or a subtitle. Like the '80s was called the me decade because it was all boom and everybody was into me,
Vanity.
me, me, and it was vanity this and vanity that and all this other good stuff. I I I personally think right now we're in the middle of the renovation generation because I mean all over America, Europe. I mean, I'm watching, good God, I'm watching people rebuild castles in France or taking old rundown farmhouses or barns. And I mean, we're talking about buildings, some of them as old as, 1200s. And they're just renovating and rebuilding these things and converting them into nice, nice homes. It's happening all over America. It's happening all over Europe. It's now starting to happen in some parts of Asia too. I'm seeing videos about this. And I have, what is the past participle of dive or the past tense of dive? Dove? Divin? I don't know. Straight into it, head first. And I'm in so deep now, I don't know that I can come up for air. I mean, it just fascinates me that people are, number one, concerned about preserving an old building like that, an old, 16th, 17th, 18th century building, and making it livable today. And even buildings that were never meant to house people. I mean, I'm watching a couple in Normandy take an old barn, and I mean, they have repointed. I mean, this is basically piled up rocks. The walls are 3 feet thick, and they're repointing it all and putting brand new roof structures on it and running electricity and I mean the whole dang dong thing and making modern houses out of these old buildings. And there's I think it's two guys over in another part of France that have taken an old dilapidated castle and they're turning it into like a 60-room hotel with bar and restaurant, the whole thing, and making it a big attraction. And they're well on their way. If they're not open next summer, I'll be surprised. I'll be shocked because they're almost ready to start booking guests in this hotel. And this place was falling down when they found it. Literally, there was one half of it had collapsed. And
So
it's gorgeous now.
so you would say this is the to one degree the um what was it again? The renovation generation.
Renovation generation, exactly. Now, Jamie's you ever seen a show about a chateau? I'll find out the name. I've seen so many about so many chateaus, and not just on continental Europe.
In
Um,
America.
we're talking about, yeah, in America and in the UK. I mean, people are rebuilding old Scottish castles and English castles, and I mean, Escape to the Chateau is one of them that I watched, Jamie. Escape to the Chateau. Yes, I watched that show. Um, oh gosh, I can't remember all of them. I do watch that, and I watch. Oh, come on,
Have you seen Queer Chateau for the Straight Guy?
no, no, but that's coming up next on ITV.
Um,
Man,
just threw that. That was just um, boy,
there
where do you
was
go from there?
another British show. I can't remember what it's called, but they kind of follow the restoration and the renovation of some of these older, and these are they're on the list of endangered historic buildings, so they have to be restored using the original tools, techniques, and materials.
San
So
Francisco Chateau Part 5.
so it's not like they're bulldozing it and then hanging drywall. That's not what's going on. I mean, they have to put it back together with lime mortar and then lime plaster on the inside and then do it period appropriate
Do they
materials. And
have
it's
plaster fights?
sometimes,
Okay, sorry.
but it's actually very cool. And it's interesting to see the difference in the construction techniques. Cause at first I was like, what the hell are they doing? What are they doing? And now I completely understand. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. That
With
works.
the shirt tied
I don't know where you're getting this.
because it's the whole chateau. Um, um,
That's French for castle.
yeah. Um, so let me ask you this. So, the restoration generation.
It could be
Um,
either or, restoration or renovation, either one, because I think both are
oh,
appropriate. I think
renovation
both are.
generation.
I think both are appropriate, though.
Okay, so let me ask you this in this little thing. I guess as we wind down to the finish line here a little bit here. Just within the structure of what I'm going to ask you. I know that
Mhm.
there's you know, in and
Sure.
outdoors everywhere. Um, which
Yeah.
which connects back to the chateau, but
Right.
um, so the 60s, the 60s. Yeah, let's start at the 60s. In the 60s, can you picture the way people dressed?
Oh God, yes, I was there.
Yeah, give me a couple of um, images.
Button-up shirts with slacks. You wore blue jeans to work. You wore a white undershirt under that button-up because nobody wanted to see men's nipples, and white t-shirts were seen as they were underwear. White t-shirts and white tank tops were underwear.
Okay.
Matching belt and shoes,
How?
crew cuts, flat tops. You know, the platforms came in the 70s,
Oh no, no,
but
don't. The 60s.
the 60s it ran the gamut because it started very clean cut, uh, almost 50ish, 50s ish, very much 50s ish.
Okay.
And then as it progressed, it got into the flower power, the tie dye. Blue jeans were being worn by more than just carpenters and people at work. People were going
Okay.
to town in blue jeans. But
Okay. So you have a spectrum there from the beginning
mhm.
to of the 60s to the end. And if I were to ask you cross the road backwards into the 50s, could you
Mhm.
picture that?
Yeah,
Okay. Like you could say,
yes.
okay, crossing the road into the 70s. Um, can you picture the
Mhm.
clothing of the people there?
Yeah, yeah.
And give me one example of what that would have something iconic. It doesn't have to
Of the
be
70s,
of the 70s.
merchandise t-shirts with logos on them, and the printed t-shirt really became a thing in the 70s. Then you got into the disco era and you had platform shoes and everybody wearing polyester, and you had to have your button-up shirt unbuttoned halfway down to your navel and like a gold chain with something on the end of it. I mean,
Okay.
it
Okay.
was.
Okay,
Yeah.
so now can you picture the 80s?
Yeah. Lots of brightish colors, but pastels were pretty big for a while too. Uh, Lots of, like, I can remember leatherette jackets, kind of vinyl jackets, where that was white with different colors, stripes on the sleeves, just in geometric patterns. Doc
Uh-huh.
Martens and things like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for the 80s, tell me if this is true or not. In a way, the 80s, as far as the hair,
Hmm.
was kind of a throwback to sometime in the 50s with the big hair, the hairspray. Was there some tie to that that you
There
could associate or no?
there was a little bit of that. The men in the 50s and early 60s wore their hair short
Mhm.
and neatly cut. I mean, the 60s, fathers were begging their sons to get haircuts. In the 50s and early 60s, fathers were begging their sons to stop getting haircuts and you had to have a comb in your pocket. You carried a comb with you, and you
Mhm.
had to make sure your hair was combed all the time. And
Okay,
it was the stereotypical thing. Your hair was slicked back and you kept combing it back, even, sitting there eating at the table, you'd comb your hair back. Put your comb down, you know.
okay. So here is where I'm going with it. You've identified very specifically the decades, and
Mhm.
we actually picked 60s through the 80s,
Mhm.
but we went back into the 50s a little bit and stuff. Um, and here's where I'm heading. If I ask you about the 90s, could you identify a wardrobe characteristic of the 90s?
Relaxed. There was a stretch of khaki pants.
Okay, in the beginning.
Yeah. Khaki pants, polo shirts made a comeback for a while. The Izod alligator.
That's true. Although
Um,
that was in the 80s too.
that was in the late 80s and early 90s. Yeah. But things got, I mean, Levi jackets went away in the 90s. You couldn't steal a Levi jacket. You still are hard
In the
pressed to find one.
in the later in the early 90s, yes, they were still
Mhm.
around because I mean,
Right.
we wore them, all of us here, even
Right.
though we're in Miami.
Yeah.
But go ahead,
But
go ahead.
from the mid 90s on, they just kind of started disappearing.
Right.
And the Doc Martin thing lasted until, oh, I don't know, I want to say 94, 95, but things became relaxed in
Okay.
the 90s, a little bit too relaxed sometimes, but
Okay.
and that's was now let me ask you, was it the 80s or the 90s that the Levi's started having like the whole front of the pant leg was like ripped up? And you'd have strings hanging off of it and stuff like that, big old holes in the front of your pants. Was that
People
late 80s or early 90s?
people did that for a rock and roll fame. If I had to pick, I don't know specifically, but I would have to say it was in the late 80s, early 90s, or mid 90s within that stretch. I can't remember now.
Okay.
I
And
really can't
then
picture.
two words for you.
Hmm.
Cool jams.
I don't even know what that is.
The like cargo shorts,
Oh,
parachute
okay.
shorts.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true. Totally. Now, here's where we're going.
Hmm.
Can you do that? Can you give me a clothing
Hmm.
iconic thing from the 2000s? And by 2000s, I mean, and actually, I'm gonna put all my cards on the table, okay? Because this
Yeah,
could go on.
I can.
I'm gonna ask. I would have asked you if I were to have kept going, but I'm gonna crunch them all together. I would have asked Mark, can you tell me from the 2000 to 2010 decade? And then I was
Hmm.
going to ask you, Mark, can you tell me from the 2010 to the 2020 decade what the iconic, if you could think of the dress? And
Hmm.
my hope would, I'm going to put all my cards on the table. My hope would have been that by the time we got into the 2000s, as I feel in my mind, but just me, is that you would have thought, hmm, there's not a lot going on as far as an iconic thing from the 2000s to the 2010s and from the 2010s to the 2020s. But you tell
Yeah, I this is going to make me sound creepy because guys kind of hit a plateau, as high or as low as you want to call it, but we kind of stabilized at blue jeans, t-shirts,
me. Yeah.
and whatever kind of shoes we happen to have at the time. There are outliers, there are differences. I mean, we
Mhm.
went for business casual and things like that.
Yeah.
But I noticed most of the difference was in what women were marrying or wearing, if you can speak.
Yeah.
In the 2000 to 2010, it was women were wearing pajama pants. They became real big and real popular.
And pajama pants are like just a
Just a pair of
clown.
the bottom half. Go down to Walmart and buy a pair of pajamas. They would wear the pants downtown with whatever t-shirt.
Oh, so that's the iconic of the
That's
2000s.
what I remember. And then it became leggings or yoga pants or whatever you want to call them from 2010 to now.
Yoga pants, as in the stretchy.
Yes, spandex, lots of
Re-
spandex.
really?
Yeah, you're not seeing that now.
I don't look.
Now, uh, full disclosure, I live in a small town, so God knows we're probably not on the cutting edge of fashion here. I can only say what I'm seeing.
No, I like I said, I would have told you if you were to have asked me the same question.
Mm-hmm.
I would have given you a rough estimate um, of everything you said for those decades.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we got into the 90s
Mm-hmm.
beyond, especially in the 2000s and up till now,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell you an iconic standout clothing that's some sort of that
It's
speaks for the generation.
Yeah, it's not like it was in the 70s where all of a sudden the girls were wearing gauchos. Do you remember? Well, you weren't alive in the early 70s. Well, you were born in the mid 70s, but you wouldn't
I've
really
been
have been
around
aware.
I've been around for an astonishing long time
Okay, well, the
at this
mid
point.
70s, it was gauchos. And gauchos were basically kind of almost a hip hugger pant, which was a real low waistline, but real loose, floppy legs that went down to about mid calf. And they were, denim, Levi material.
Okay.
And that was a style for a little while. But yeah, here we go. Jim Dockerel in the 2000s, tracksuits, sweatpants with a sweat top.
Yeah, but you guys, so my
Yeah, I,
argument to all
I
of
had
you guys
forgotten
would
about
be
that.
you're picking out things that not only existed throughout all the decades. I mean, it's not like somebody's going to come out with something
Right.
so radical, like some sort of like
Well,
octopus hat.
no,
With,
you're absolutely right on
but
that. But the thing is, everybody started wearing it.
I can't speak to that because, like I said,
Well,
maybe it's just me, but to me, fashion variation that stands out ended
mhm.
in 1989. To be frickin', there was a
Well,
little bit of outliers after, but to me,
no, there
um,
weren't there weren't radical changes. It's just things got popular and went in and out of style. But like wearing pajama pants downtown was a thing. I mean, you couldn't go into a grocery store without seeing women wearing pajama bottoms with whatever top they were
I've
wearing.
seen that.
Hmm
I've seen that, but like when I go to the
But
grocery
it
store,
was like an epidemic in the 2000s. It was just wow. Are
when I
you
was in
kidding?
school, when
Hmm
I was in school, I can't get this out of my head because I'm gonna
hmm
tell you something, dude. It was wild
hmm
because there's all these girls in school.
hmm
You're all the same age and whatnot. You're going into your class, and they have this hair
Oh yeah.
tossed up. It was almost like going to some sort. It's like we weren't going to school. We were all meeting in the back alley of some sort of Las
Yeah.
Vegas
Well, Remember the Farrah Fawcett posters?
Yes.
Imagine every girl in your school with their hair swept back like that. You know, every girl wanted that hairstyle, except for the fans of Dorothy Hamill. They had the wedge. You know, if they couldn't grow their hair out because mom wouldn't let them grow their hair out, they got the wedge. You know, it was or what was the other one? The Mary Lou Retton look, the gymnast.
You know what I
So
did have though? I did in the 70s up until the 80s, in the mid 70s going into the 80s. They gave me the traditional the bowl
the
cut.
bowl cut, yes.
I had the little hair like that and stuff.
Hmm.
And that was something that they did. I don't know if kids they do that, but that ran into the 80s and stuff. And if you remember commercials with like, "Hey
Hmm.
Mikey, he likes it," when
Yep.
talking about the
Yep.
shredded wheat, I think it was,
Oh,
or Oreos.
life cereal, life cereal.
It was
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
Um, it's like every kid had that little haircut. It's like it was part of the theme and this and that.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was just curious. If you asked me, I would say that fashion is whatever now. There's no unifier.
Yeah, I right now there really, as far as men are concerned, there really isn't a unifier. Now it's gone from clothes to your body. I mean, and that's been going on since the 2000s as well. I mean, look at the amount of ink people get now,
Yeah.
and the piercings and things like that. So it's less about the clothes. In fact, they wear as little clothes as they can get away with, the weather allowing, so they can show off the tattoos and the piercings and what have you.
Yeah.
But as far as men are concerned, there's not really a whole hell of a lot to say as far as fashion. Um, you came along about the time the rock and roll t-shirts exploded. Because I mean, it was going crazy by the time you got into that.
No,
It started before you, but it never really took off until like about 81, 82. Then it just kaboom.
no,
And
when we were kids, we didn't. When we were little kids going to elementary,
mhm,
well, I was going to private school to be honest with you, so
yeah,
we just wore uniforms. But we were getting into the music, and the
yeah,
adult kids or the older kids were wearing that.
yeah, that's what I mean. It was coming up, but about 81, maybe 82, it just exploded. It took off. Bands that would have never thought of creating a t-shirt
Yeah,
started doing it, and then they
yeah,
started selling concert shirts. They figured out there's more to this than just uh, selling a record and selling a poster. We can sell all kinds of merch, and pretty soon you had Pink Floyd bumper stickers, where before you only had the album and the poster.
oh yeah,
You know,
the
I mean,
mall.
it just took off. It
In
went
the mall, we
crazy.
had T-shirt shops
Hmm.
pop up.
Yeah.
It was like, you know, just all the rock and roll stuff, and you'd go in there was a trip. You
Hmm.
you would visit the CD. You'd visit the record shop.
Hmm.
You would visit the arcade.
Hmm.
There was a bookstore.
Yeah.
Um, we'd we'd hit all the places. We'd hit the arcade. It was literally
Hmm.
what you would see how people look back now retro
Yeah.
and talk about retro. It was that experience. We go to
Yeah.
the CD, we'd go to the record shop, we'd go to the arcade, we'd
Hmm.
go to the t-shirt shop.
Exactly. And
you know
you're right. T-shirt shops just sprung up overnight. The shoe repair business closed down, and 2 weeks later there was a t-shirt shop in its place.
yeah
And stuff like that was going on, and it just exploded because I can remember I was in fourth grade when I got my first printed t-shirt, and there was no t-shirt shop. I got it at a flea market. There was a guy there with a heat transfer press, and you picked out the pattern, and they sized your t-shirt right there, put that, and did the transfer, took it
that's
off,
right
and you put it on right there,
that's
and
right
dad gave him the money and off you went.
I
There
forgot
was no t-shirt shop. It was all
that.
done at the flea market.
No, but they had those presses. I
Hmm.
remember that. Oh, by the way, just from for our Canadian friends, see, this is my only link to you guys, known link to you guys. Back then, I was a little kid. I went into the store, and one of my earlier albums, I got a Rush album. I had no idea who the hell Rush was,
Mm-hmm.
but I got the album. It was a gray album with a rabbit and like a top hat, I think it was, and it was
Mm-hmm.
Rush's. It all things considered, it's one of Rush's worst albums, like by far, because they turned into like this synthesizer music stuff. But it was still rocking. But that was one of my early albums, Rush, and I listened to it even though it was too, from my understanding as a kid then, too much synthesizer.
Mm-hmm.
But since you bought it, you had to enjoy it. So by hook or crook, I ended up liking Rush, even though it wasn't, their best album. I picked what I picked.
My introduction to Rush was the song "Fly By Night," and I had to go get the album. I had to go get it.
That was
and
a great
I
song.
was hooked. I was hooked from then on. So
it was a great song.
But I mean, we could do an entire episode on Rush. But
look,
one of my all-time favorite bands. Let me just say
it's a fantastic band. So and by the way, we're not trying to sweeten you guys up over there in Canada. I'm just saying,
that gives a damn where they're from. I like the band.
Yeah. I did want to. I just want to close off by hitting you with the last one. Have you seen the series? And notice I didn't stop to hear your answer. I just kept going. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Because I just want to pack all the stuff that I had.
More value for your entertainment dollar.
Okay, so I'll just throw you this one. Have you heard of the series Stranger Things?
I've heard of it, but I've not watched any episodes.
I think there's like 3 seasons right now.
Okay.
And it's a total throwback from the theme to the opening credits. It's kids in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
It literally speaks to literally me. This is me, what I would have been doing literally with my except for the supernatural stuff that occurs. But the point is, they play D&D. All the stuff, go to the arcades, all the stuff we did. Anyways, there's that series. It's a Netflix series, and it's really interesting. They mix the mysterious and they give it a 80s theme, and you really feel like, wow, I remember something. This could have been in the 80s, so it gives you a good vibe. Well, it's been so successful. I don't know if you know this or not, but
it's pretty big.
Yeah, it's pretty big. But get this, they've opened up, and they're opening up one here, a themed store. Okay. They've opened one in Dallas. I think there's one in California somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to open up one over here in Aventura.
Mm-hmm.
And what it is they theme it all 80s.
Mm-hmm.
It's to sell their merchandise and make
obviously money. Yeah.
It's gotten so popular that apparently, the front is all 80s sort of neon.
Mm-hmm.
With the entrance, you walk in, and they've recreated kind of like a Disney World theme type thing. Each scene of the series, with the high school lockers, and they have all the weird things that occurred in the movie or in the series, and it's all themed with arcade games, and you can actually play the arcades. And they're selling shirts and mugs, just the whole idea.
Yeah,
it's a playground for 80s things, and they've opened up a few of them. I found it super interesting in that the things we did normal back then that we didn't really pay attention to as something out of the norm is now being looked at as nostalgic.
Nobody wants to think of the generation or the decade they grew up in that they identify with as nostalgic.
It's interesting.
Nobody wants to admit that.
It's very weird, Mark, because
I know it is.
We were
Welcome
just
to my world.
But we were just well. Let me be clear. It's kind of the vibe that I get from. Okay, so when I watched that 70s show, now remember, like all the people around me. I mean, I was a little kid, but I was that baby. If I would have been that baby in that '70s show.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're taking things in from the point of view of a baby, of a little kid as
Right.
you're growing up.
And I was 14 or 15 when you were that baby.
Right, right. So, but my point is that when I watch that '70s show, I feel comfortable around it. Like I
Mm-hmm.
feel because you know what I'm saying. Like you were
Mm-hmm.
surrounded by that, even though you were
Right.
a kid, right, a little baby. The '80s now with this sort of thing, I'm like, wow, that's totally me,
Yeah.
right? Like that's totally me at that era. Um, so I don't, I've never experienced, but with the '70s, so basically what I'm saying is it's kind of weird, like you were saying, to see the '80s portrayed that way when it was just totally freaking normal for you. It's a really weird thing.
And it was just yesterday, wasn't it?
It was freaking. I can remember it perfectly, dude.
It was just yesterday.
Yeah, I can remember it perfectly.
Welcome to my world. Welcome to my world.
It's so insane. It's
Yeah.
so it's so insane.
Yeah.
I didn't say a
I
full
mean,
one.
nope, but you got close to it. Frankie's CNC and Woodworking Channel. A guy I know turned his house into a 50s diner theme. My cousin Clay up on the coast up here did that with, he has I guess you'd call it a man cave. I don't know what else you would call it. It's not his garage, it's not his shop, but he's got the soda counter with the
Yeah,
popcorn machine and a jukebox and all of the, the round red leatherette stools and
yeah,
the whole thing and the black and white checkerboard tile
that's nice.
and a 1958 Corvette in mint condition parked right in the middle of it on carpet that never leaves the building. And he's an old car nut. His daily driver is a 57 Chevy. And he took the rear end, the trunk area of a 57 Chevy, cut it off, and made a sofa out of it, a love
That's
seat
super
out
cool.
of it. And right there next to it, he's got a pole from a drive-in theater with 2 speakers on it. I mean, he just did his entire thing is 50s era.
Yeah,
And it's a cool place to hang out, a cool place to be.
that's super cool.
So, yeah. I mean, I can relate to stuff like that. So,
yeah.
Yeah, Jamie, some of the exact military vehicles my dad drove in the Army are now in his regiment's museum. Yeah. Time does kind of, Pink Floyd was right. Every year is getting shorter, never seem to find the time. It just, the days seem to go by real slow, but the year just whips right by. It's almost 2023. We are reminded 2000, the year 2000 was almost 23 years ago.
Hold that thought for half a second. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Yeah. Scotty.
Oh,
beam us up,
dude. You remember flip phones?
Yeah.
They're coming back. The smart flip phone. I saw that the other day on a commercial. Holy cow.
Really?
It's a smartphone clamshell. I'm like, you're bringing back the flip phone, but you don't have the guts to call it a flip phone.
Actually, I like the flip phone because there was some sort of protection aspect to it.
Mm-hmm. Fold it again, put it in your pocket.
Yeah, then again, you know what I'm saying? It's like at this point, it's like I will for my thing, because I know we're at the finish line.
Coming up on 2 hours, yeah.
Yeah, but I just want to say this one thing. One thing I will say, and we've talked about this, and I will say, I don't care how many decades across the way, from the moment computers started till now, there's no alternative suitable for me up till now that can compare to a solid computer tower, stationary,
yep,
and a screen in front of me that acts as an actual workstation
Yep.
environment.
Yep.
The phone and looking at anything, it just, well, first of all, I can't see it, so properly.
Yeah.
It's useless for me.
I'm with you.
Useless.
I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. I mean, I see these guys. Oh man, I got my new MacBook. Really? Jesus,
Wait a
dude,
second.
I just got a 32-inch monitor. You know,
Yeah.
I can't see that. You know, I don't want to watch. Remember the opening of Star Wars, the opening scene to Star Wars?
Yeah.
Imagine watching that for the first time on your phone
Sucks.
and thinking, and they thought this was cool. Now put that sucker up on a big screen in front of you with Dolby stereo surround sound.
Yeah.
Now you're talking.
And frankly, considering all the things that we've just said,
Mhm.
there's no, other than nostalgia, there's too many cool things that we have access to right now.
Oh, I'd never go back.
Yeah.
No.
Because I mean, I would go back if I were like, in the Scrooge, the
Mhm.
Christmas
Ghost of
story.
Christmas Past and Ghost of, yeah.
Yeah, it would be cool to be able to. I mean, but I'm sure we have that locked into our memories. But sometimes it's not the same. It would be nice to be able to, like a photo, but in real life to do that. But all that said, we have so much cool technology. I mean, I'm sorry, just the selection of entertainment,
Yeah.
of movies. You don't even have to pay
Mhm.
for it. You could just do the I mean, you pay for it, but the point is, you could go to YouTube and there's actual movies. Like, there's so much more available to us.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's
It's not like it was when you and I were kids, when you had 3 networks to choose from, and if the president was on, he was on all of them at the same time, and it's
Yeah,
like, well, there went that evening.
yeah.
I
I
guess
did
I'll have to go read a book, you know?
That did happen a few times, and it was, for a kid, that's useless.
Uh-huh.
All right. Any last words before we mosey on out of here?
Boys and girls, take my advice, pull down your drawers and slide on the ice. That's
Right.
all.
And that would not be a problem if you were in Miami, because ice would help.
Yeah.
All right. So listen, thank you guys for hanging out. I had a great time. I enjoyed the different variety of. I'm glad that we did get a little bit in the serious, and then we went into this. Well, we got a lot into the serious, but we were eclectic. So I don't think it's departing from our traditional conversations anyhow. I
No.
think that it's well within our
Yeah.
scope. We want to thank you for hanging out with us. We go live every Tuesday, 6:30 Pacific Coast and 9:30 East Coast, and we have a channel over on YouTube, which is what you're watching and listening to now. Trampled Underfoot podcast on YouTube, and we have a website, same name, trampledunderfoot.com, and a
Trampled
site
Underfoot.
over
Trampled Underfoot podcast.com.
trampledunderfootpodcast.com.
Yeah, we
And
had to
then
add podcast because we didn't want Jimmy Page coming after us.
that's right. We're totally different. And we also have a Facebook page. You can drop us some show suggestions over there. So we're also sponsored by
Harneo Media, your web source. If Steve throws up the link in the chat right now, click on that link. If you're looking to increase your web presence, or if you're looking to create a web presence, Steve Nealon at harneomedia.com is the person to talk to. You're not dealing with some nameless, faceless entity at a call center. You're dealing with Steve 100%, and he will treat you right. It's personalized service, the best in town. I'm here to tell you. Steve Nealon over at Harneal Media, HARNEAL media.com, sponsor of TrampledUnderfootPodcast.com.
All right, that was quite radio friendly.
Now back to Eloy, the dulcet tones of the man from Miami.
All right, so listen. Enjoy the rest of your week. Be safe and have a good one. Do that which you find enjoyable and pleasant, and we'll catch you next time. See ya.
Peace.